We're getting a lot of emails into our inboxes about parents asking how to talk to their kids about the war in Ukraine. It was pretty powerful. I saw a Ukrainian member of parliament talking about how she plays a game with her kid as the bombs are going down, telling them to pretend to be a turtle, keep your mouth open, and get down low like a turtle in a shell. And it was so heartbreaking to watch. But watching it from over here in our living rooms, what should we be focused on when we tell our kids about what's going on?
Well, we do want to tell them about it because if they don't hear it from us, they're going to hear it from someone. But the first thing we want to do before we tell is we find out what they already know. So ask your child, have you heard about the situation in Ukraine? What have you heard? If they've heard nothing, then you can begin with an explanation and we'll come back to that. But if they've heard something, you're going to want to know what they've heard. And I will tell you, I asked my 11-year-old daughter, what are you hearing about Ukraine? And she said, World War III.
Wow.
And I said, I'm really glad I asked. I said, I need to reassure you that's not where this is right now. I said, but that sounds really scary. So find out what they know so that you can empathize with that information or correct that information. And then ask, do you want me to tell you more? Because part of what we're trying to do is help kids titrate how much information they take in at once. We don't want them to become overwhelmed by this.
Wow, because I would just go on and on and on as a journalist. So I'm glad that you said, control sort of that valve. But what about younger kids? How do you approach it with younger kids? And what if your child doesn't really know anything about the war? Should you have that discussion?
I think you should, because there's every possibility they will hear something about it on the playground. So if you say to your child, have you heard anything about the attack on Ukraine? And they say no, you're not off the hook. Then you need to say, okay, well, I want to tell you about it in case you hear about it from somebody else. And then I think the way that one could go about this is to say, there's a man named Putin who's in charge of Russia, and he is attacking Ukraine. It is unprovoked. There's no reason for it beyond him wanting to expand his power. And the world is working to figure out how to bring this under control without doing any more harm than is already being done. You can keep it simple, but you want them to hear from you about what's happening, and you also want to make it clear that they can then come back and ask you about what's happening. If you bring it up, you're basically saying this is a conversation that's on the table, and you're inviting them to return to you. I also think, Reena, we talk about this all the time on the podcast, it's really important to separate out the lyrics and the tune. Your lyrics are the words you say. They should be clear. They should be as straightforward as possible. Your tune should be as reassuring as possible. The language you use, the way you talk about what's happening, the tone you wrap around it. If you're feeling really tense, if you're feeling really upset, if you're feeling really nervous, that's what's going to come across. However reassuring your words might be, your tone is actually going to undermine that message. So try to have a steady tone.
I've got the news on all day long. Should we be controlling the media and the images our kids are seeing?
Absolutely. You know how it's one thing to read a book, it's another thing to see the movie, that sometimes we see things that can't be unseen. And especially with TV, you don't know what the next image is that might pop up. So I would say, especially for younger children, but maybe kids of all ages, we want to be really thoughtful about which media is on in the house, which media they are exposed to, because we want our children to know about what's happening. It's important for all of us to bear witness to what is happening. There's no upside to our children becoming overwhelmed by what is happening.
A friend whose daughter has been watching a lot of TikTok videos is worried that there'll be a mandatory draft in the US, that we're going to have to go over there in this war and help them fight. What else should we be keeping in mind as our kids of all ages, from toddlers to teens, are processing what's going on right now?
Well, that's such a good example of just all of this information flying around and how important it is to know what kids are hearing so that we can say things like, a draft is unlikely, but then we can also say things like, we really don't know how this is going to play out, and we're going to all have to watch this play out together. And again, lyrics, tune, trying to keep that tune as calm as possible. The other thing I think we want to do is direct their attention to how they can be helpful. It is really scary for kids to feel like things are out of control and there's nothing to be done. And in truth, Reena, we know this is something where the world is watching and many of us do feel helpless. But if there's a human-to-human quality, take your kids' attention and direct it there. How can we help people who are refugees? Where can we send our resources? How can we help refugees who come to our community? and give kids something to focus on about ways in which they can make a difference and ways in which they can be helpful.
Why is that so important, to get them to be able to see that they can make a difference, even when we as adults know there's not a whole lot we can do to change the situation in Ukraine from our living rooms?
The reality, Reena, and this is what's so hard, is none of us know how this is going to play out. We've never really seen anything like this. And so there's an element of this that is very, very unsettling for all of us. But we can help with our money or our resources or our efforts to try to bring comfort to people who are suffering. That gives kids a way to feel like it's not totally out of control.
Some great advice, because these are just tough moments and you don't know what is the right thing as a parent to do. You want your kids prepared. You don't want them scared, but it's pretty anxious times right now for so many people.
It is. And I, was standing with both of my girls talking about it, and I said, this is something we are just going to have to watch and see how it plays out. And that is true. I think that's the reality. I said to them, you are safe, we are safe, but this is something we're going to have to see how it plays out. And I was minding my tune so carefully, Reena, in those moments, because that's what I've got. I can offer some sense that I'm not terrified of this. I'm watching it with them, and we'll watch it together, and I'll try to do my part to help them understand it as it plays out.
Great advice, Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you, Reena.